A quaint 1950 English village, blanketed in soft snow at dusk, warm lights glowing in cottage windows, smoke curling from chimneys, a festive yet somber atmosphere. Miss Jane Marple stepping off a village bus, dressed in a wool coat and hat, holding a small travel case, greeted by her old friend outside a charming country cottage. A young postman, in a red scarf, cycling along a snowy lane, carrying a leather satchel filled with letters, looking cheerful yet thoughtful. A grand yet slightly weathered English manor house, under heavy snowfall, warm lights in a few windows, ivy-covered stone walls. Villagers decorating shop windows with holly and lanterns, children pulling sleds, a gentle festive feeling overlaid by an eerie quiet. A lifeless postman lying in the snow near a manor gate, footprints surrounding the scene, snowflakes falling gently, no gore. Hell. Miss Marple kneeling delicately beside the body, observing small clues in the snow. A calm and thoughtful expression. An older, stern ex-military man, in a cluttered study, medals on the wall. Miss Marple seated opposite him, quiet tension between them. A gentle young schoolteacher. In a chilly classroom with wooden desks, Miss Marple speaking to her warmly, while snow piles at the window. A well-dressed but anxious man, standing in a manor hallway, hands clasped behind his back, watching Miss Marple with unease. An elderly aristocratic lady, reclining in an ornate canopy bed, pale and weak. A nurse hovering nearby. Miss Marple observing quietly. The vicar and his wife Alma, serving tea in a cozy sitting room. Yet both look uneasy, fire crackling behind them. A torn envelope on a wooden desk, wax seal broken, papers scattered, candlelight, illuminating the scene dramatically. A shadowy figure confronting the postman near a frosty garden gate, tension in their posture. The captain alone at night polishing old medals, haunted expression, whiskey untouched beside him. Penelope Grey crying quietly beside a schoolhouse. Window. Winter light, casting long shadows. A trail of messy footprints leading behind the vicarage, partially covered by fresh snow. Miss Marple knitting beside a fireplace in a quiet cottage, her eyes sharp with deduction. Miss Marple questioning Leonard Blackwell in a richly furnished drawing room, his face pale and tense. The elderly woman sitting upright in bed, gripping Miss Marple's hand, revealing a shocking secret. A softly lit flashback showing the captain standing over the fallen postman, snow swirling around him, panic on his face. Miss Marple comforting Penelope Grey at her cluttered teacher's desk. Warm lamplight against a cold backdrop. Miss Marple walking toward the vicarage at dusk, lamplight glowing from within, heavy snow falling, atmosphere thick with tension. Inside the vicarage, Miss Marple, calmly confronting a put, shocked and trembling Alma, the vicarage interior warm but oppressive. Alma collapsing into a chair, weeping, confessing everything. Miss Marple watching with compassionate sadness. The vicar embracing Alma as she cries. Firelight behind them. A quiet moment of forgiveness. A beautifully lit English church filled with villagers, candles glowing, holly decorations, gentle snowfall seen through stained glass. Villagers warmly greeting the vicar and his wife after the service. Soft lantern light. Snowflakes drifting around them. Miss Marple, standing with her suitcase on a snowy lane, waving goodbye to her friend Adelaide, smoke rising from village chimneys. Miss Marple walking alone along a snowy countryside path, serene expression, sunrise on the horizon, symbolizing closure. The confession in the vicarage. Snow hissed, quietly, against the windows of the vicarage sitting room, as Miss Marple guided Alma Treadwell inside. The vicar's wife walked like someone newly aged, each step stiff with dread. She clutched her cardigan with white-knuckled hands. "Please," Alma whispered, "don't make me say it." "My dear," Miss Marple replied gently. "You must. For Charles, for your husband, and for your own soul." Alma collapsed into a chair, trembling. Behind her, the polished brass clock ticked with almost accusatory precision. Miss Marple waited, hands folded neatly. At last, Alma spoke. "It began in November," she said. "A letter came for me, not addressed to me, of course, but to Paul. I recognized the solicitor's seal. I opened it." She gave a soft cry, covering her face. "I have always handled the parish post. Paul is forgetful, he misplaces things, and oh, how foolish I was." The letter contained information about the church accounts, transactions made in Paul's name that I carried out without telling him. Miss Marple nodded slowly. "You diverted funds for repairs," Alma choked. "We were behind on everything: the roof, the heating, the vestry, floor. The diocese would never approve such expenses, not all at once. And Paul, he hates paperwork. He simply trusts me too much." Her voice wavered. "I borrowed from Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. I always meant to replace it once donations came in over Christmas. But the solicitor's letter said a full audit was coming. Everything would be exposed." Miss Marple's gaze softened. "Fear makes even good people foolish." Alma sobbed harder. "I panicked. I hid the letter. And then another came, addressed to Mrs. Blackwell. I shouldn't have opened it, but I feared it contained more references to financial irregularities. If she read anything that led back to our accounts—" "You stole it," Miss Marple said gently. Alma nodded miserably. "Charles saw me take it. He confronted me." Her eyes filled with pure anguish. "He said he had to tell Paul that it wasn't right." He was shaking. "Miss Marple, so earnest, so loyal. I begged him, truly begged him to wait, to give me time to set things right. But he insisted he had a duty. And so," Miss Marple said softly, "you offered him cocoa." Alma let out a wail. "I only wanted to calm him. He was upset, shivering from the cold, and talking so quickly. I added valerian drops, the herbal kind, to soothe the nerves. I have used them myself." Miss Marple placed a hand on Alma's shoulder. "But you used far too much." Alma's sobbing turned into gasping. I didn't know it would stop his heart. When he collapsed, I thought he'd fainted. But then I knew. I knew he was gone." Silence settled over the room like a shroud. Miss Marple looked at her kindly, though her eyes were full of sorrow. "And afterward, I hid the letter. I placed Charles in the snow near the gate to make it seem he'd slipped. I thought, oh, how wicked it seems now. I thought the cold might explain everything. I kept imagining Paul seeing his body, imagining the village gossiping, imagining the shame. And Mrs. Blackwell, oh, the earlier letter mentioned the gardener. I thought if she read it, Penelope's father would be dismissed, and she would blame the church, and everything would spiral." She buried her face in her hands. "It was all fear. Fear upon fear." Miss Marple nodded. "That is how most tragedies begin." At that moment, the vicar himself entered, snow dusting his coat, cheeks rosy from the cold. He stopped short when he saw the scene before him. "Alma? Miss Marple? Whatever is?" Alma sprang up, wild-eyed. "Paul, oh Paul, I've been such a fool." And she collapsed against him, weeping uncontrollably. The vicar looked to Miss Marple, bewildered and frightened. Miss Marple touched his arm. "She needs to tell you everything, and you need to listen with all the compassion you possess." The vicar swallowed hard, then nodded. "Whatever it is, we will face it together." Miss Marple stepped aside, quietly granting them privacy. As she slipped out into the cold afternoon air, She heard Alma's trembling voice begin its long confession. The village reacts. News spread through Little Welford in that peculiar quiet way of English villages, through the soft creak of a shop door, the murmur over washing lines, the discreet tap on a neighbor's window. By the next morning, the entire village knew the truth. But something remarkable happened. They forgave Alma, or rather they understood her. Mrs. Adelaide Northcott summed it up over breakfast. She shouldn't have meddled, of course, but once fear grips a person, well, one can hardly think straight. Captain Blanchard said gruffly, "Never meant to harm the boy, that's plain enough." Penelope Grey wept, but with relief. "I couldn't bear to think it was father. Oh, thank goodness." As for Leonard Blackwell, he offered what might pass for contrition. "I suppose I was rather horrid to her. Her husband always visits Aunt Harriet, quite dutifully. Perhaps I judged too harshly." The vicar stood before his congregation the following Sunday with his wife beside him. They spoke with humility, no excuses, no defensiveness. Paul Treadwell asked for the village's patience as he worked with the diocese to rectify the accounts. Alma apologized openly, trembling but resolute, and Little Welford, like most villages, embraced its wounded members rather more tightly than its triumphant ones. A quiet tea with Miss Marple. 2 days before Christmas, Adelaide Northcott brewed a special pot of Darjeeling and set out a plate of currant biscuits. Miss Marple joined her in the drawing-room, feeling rather as though she had lived a small lifetime in the past. "Weak, you have done wonders," Adelaide said, pouring tea. "Poor Charles, and poor Alma." Miss Marple sighed softly. "Yes, a sad business, a very sad business indeed." "But you solved it." Miss Marple gave a modest shrug. "Oh, I merely paid attention. People so often reveal themselves if one listens with care." Adelaide smiled. "You always did see more than anyone else." Miss Marple sipped her tea. "You know, my dear Adelaide, people think of wickedness as something grand, malicious, plots, calculated cruelty, but very often it comes in quite ordinary packages. Fear, pride, shame. These are the real culprits. Alma was not evil. She was frightened, desperately so." "Do you think she should be punished?" Adelaide asked gently. Miss Marple looked into the fire. "Punishment rarely changes a person, but responsibility that can. Alma will carry Charles's death with her all her life, and she will devote herself to doing good, I suspect. That is the harder path by far." Adelaide nodded, moved. "And Charles?" Miss Marple's eyes softened. "He was a good lad, steady, honest, and very brave that night. He stood up for what he believed right, even when it frightened him. I hope the village will remember him kindly." "They will," Adelaide said. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the soft pop of the fire. Christmas Eve, at St. Mark's, snow still lay thick upon Little Welford on Christmas Eve, though lanterns lit the paths leading to St. Mark's Church. Inside, candles flickered warmly, casting a glow across the pews. Holly and ivy garlands adorned the walls, and the scent of pine mixed with candle wax. Miss Marple slipped into a seat near the back, content to observe. The choir began with a gentle hymn. Mrs. Blackwell, restored enough to sit upright, was wheeled in by her nurse. Captain Blanchard straightened his jacket as though preparing for inspection. Leonard sat beside his aunt, attempting to look respectable. Penelope Grey guided her frail father to a place near the aisle. At last, the vicar entered with Alma at his side. The congregation quieted. Paul Treadwell addressed them softly. "This year, our village has endured sorrow, but we have also seen compassion, truth, and mercy, qualities that bind us far more strongly than fear ever could." Alma stood with her hands clasped tightly, but her posture was steadier now. Miss Marple watched her with gentle approval. When the service ended, Villagers drifted into the snowy night, speaking in warm tones, exchanging greetings, offering reassurances to Alma and Paul. Miss Marple slipped out quietly. She preferred to watch the village mend itself, rather than stand at its center. Farewell to Little Welford. The next morning, Miss Marple packed her small travel case. Adelaide fluttered around her like a worried sparrow. "Jane, must you leave on Christmas Day? You know you're always welcome." "Oh yes, my dear, but I promised myself I'd be home for St. Stephen's. There's quite a nice parish luncheon in St. Mary Mead, cold chicken and mince pies. One shouldn't miss such things." Adelaide hugged her tightly. "You are remarkable, Jane. Truly." Miss Marple smiled. "Not at all. Just a little old woman who notices things." She stepped out into the crisp morning air, snow crunching beneath her boots. As she looked back at Little Welford, its chimneys smoking, its cottages quiet beneath their snowy caps, she felt that familiar mixture of fondness and melancholy. Another village restored, another tragedy understood, another Christmas touched with both sorrow and grace. And Miss Marple, steady as ever, walked on.